maybe because I can't do anything else. That's probably a big reason. I was just pursuing the arts because my parents introduced me, because when I was a kid, in terms of drawing, I was always doing that and making things. In terms of music, my parents were, I think they were music enthusiasts to some extent. So quite a few of my records my LPs are theirs. They're not using anymore, so I took them. And they're all basically jazz and R&B records, So, but yeah, I guess my interest in the arts is basically because I don't know what to say. It's a place where you can perfect a craft, and through that craft, something human can be said. It's kind of like being maybe the same kind of, I'm not sure I would make it a good analogy, but the same kind of satisfaction you would get out of making a really nice table or something like that. But the stronger you get at the craft, then it becomes art afterwards. So music and visual art and the other arts are maybe, at least for me, similar to that, And the other thing I would say maybe is that the more, I don't know, I hate to use the word transcendence, but there's something, there are correlations that you can make between your extra musical life and your musical life, and they begin to join, gradually. So, I think that's very powerful. The same ones I have now. No, I mean, I've added some, but, my favorite saxophone player was John Coltrane at the time, and probably still my favorite saxophone player. Maybe I've just added some, but if I have to name one, John Coltrane, Sonny Rollins, Sonny Stitt, Gene Ammons at the time, too. So my father had these Sonny Stitt, Gene Ammons duet records. Miles Davis. Those were probably the ones in terms of jazz musicians that I liked the most at the time. He just had radiated a certain amount of power, a huge amount of power, and maybe a regal countenance, and at the same time, sadness, humility, and fragility. Those two together is a rare combination. I thought it was rare then. I still think it's rare now. I'm more like the latter, yeah, for sure. I think everyone's different, but I think we all come from something, even if you're trying to, let's say, you were saying, forget certain influences, you had them at some point. You still heard something. You still come from a language. I feel like you might as well, I guess for me, I feel like I'm joining something, So why not invite them? They're better than I am. And trying to sound like them means I'll sound better. I'm just trying to put it simply, but I've got nothing, got nothing to lose. And gradually, the self will sort itself out anyway. So I wasn't really worried about that. Never, fine. I mean, like that. No, I have certain rituals I have to keep, for sure. Yeah, I'm not one of those. I mean, people who can just pick it up, their instrument, and play and sound good. Forget it. Yeah, I can't do that. There's certain things that I might do, practice routines that I try and keep, or that I keep based on how many days I haven't been able to play or how much time I have. So they might be certain things that I do with the metronome, certain patterns I might play. It's a certain, without going into the details, a certain way that I go out about practicing, given the time I have allotted. to get to the point where I can feel halfway decent. Oh, I would say like exercise. I like, running and certain kinds of strength building types of exercise, mind body type of exercise. Cooking, reading, and just general reading and research. Just curious about things, and I just like to learn and just educate myself. So yeah, that would be it. I don't know if I have an ideal student. If there's an ideal student, I would just think about someone who's basically receptive to constructive criticism, someone who is willing to do the work, and someone who's inspired to engage in music. Someone who feels like for example, there's one student that I had once who. I forgot how he said it was really funny, but basically he was looking for basically some kind of constructive criticism. He's like, give it to me, I can't wait, Basically, that's the ideal student, someone who's, I wouldn't say that's looking for faults, but basically looking for ways to learn more, improve themselves, and isn't the opposite. The opposite would be someone who's only looking for compliments, doesn't want to do the work. So I'm interested in the other. So that's what, and I'm not so concerned about whether they can do it or not. And I'm fine with that. I would rather have a student that, let's say maybe who's someone who's less talented or whatever, and maybe they don't even get much better, but they're super stoked and they try and do it, than someone who's super talented and whatever, can play everything, but kind of plays nothing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that's more inspiring. Basically, what I'm saying about music is, I don't like to use the word. It's more about the journey, but it's more about the experience than the results at the end. I mean, you want some results, you're going to get them, but the experience of engaging in doing something or learning something that you don't know. So that's the kind of person I'm interested in. Oh, in terms of time, I think it depends on the tune. I would say the bass and drums equally, but if as a default, if things are more, if I need help or whatever it is, I listen to the bass player. I feel like that's the main timekeeper. Yeah. No. No, I don't. I'd definitely try. If there's anything, I don't think, nothing discursive. Yeah. It's the same kind of notion you had if you're riding a bike or when you tie your shoes. Or you're eating. There's things that you're doing, but you're not thinking about it. That kind of connectedness. If you have to think about it, then you can't really do it. Or if you're playing a sport, you're not thinking about it. You know what you're doing. You're going to throw the basketball or you're kicking a ball or whatever, but you're not thinking about it. The thinking you do when you practice. So what can I? I'm aware. You're trying to be aware, but it's another kind of awareness. It's like less of a self-conscious one. I think the kind of awareness that's not discursive is one that's faster and in some ways more intelligent. The only time I'm thinking on stage is if there's something new that I'm trying and I want to deliberately just put it in there. So I'm thinking, all right, on this tune. Or if I'm sight reading, and the music's pretty difficult, then I'm not really thinking, but there's more that discursive thought. Okay, there's a move here. All right, we're going to the bridge. Okay, there's a time change. Things like that. I'm not thinking, but it's less intuitive. It's more like, craft oriented. Well, I'd say one thing doesn't necessarily help me. I'd say for chordal instruments like piano or guitar, I don't. What I want from them is maybe their individual interpretation of the chords and the way they comping the way they want to. It depends on what needs to happen. Sometimes they need to play just to help the groove to happen. But in general, I don't necessarily like autopilot comping. I don't need that. I don't need them to play the chords for me. I've got that part. I just need them to play something that's either that, so we're having some kind of connection or something that's interesting for me to play over. If they're playing voicings that are dragged, then I'd rather them just not play, or just wait for a minute and then come in. Something that, so I guess that's what I don't need is just comping for the sake of being in there and keeping things together when they don't necessarily need it. When the band doesn't necessarily need it. Hone your craft and be ready to make a living, and maybe, be prepared to play. And I think a lot of musicians are, some are not, I don't know, but be prepared to play whatever you need to play to live. It may be something that you don't like, and eventually you'll probably get to the point where you can play more music that you want to play, I would say, and be smart about if you want to play for a living. Depends on what you want to do. If you want to teach more, you don't want to travel. But you're talking about people who want to play mostly, yeah. I would say be smart about where you live. Like if you want to play, you're going to have to travel to a certain extent. That also means that, be smart about what you're doing. So you need to get to know people. You need to let other people hear you play. You may not be able to be a leader all the time. Rarely can people do that. So you probably have to be hired by others. That means you have to be able to read well and be able to play other people's music. That also means that you need to play in order to make other people sound good. That's very important. Of course, that means when you think about that, that's reflexive. That means you have to sound good too. But in other words, think about what can I do to help the band sound good, whatever band I'm in. That helps, because when you do that, then if you make other people sound good, or when I say make them, I mean you contribute to making people sound good. Leaders like that. People like that, and they say, "Oh, I'm going to call them again," because when they play, somehow it feels good. As opposed to maybe hiring someone else who might sound great, but for some reason doesn't sound as good. They're going to probably hire the one that makes them sound good. So, so if I'm just saying it's a simple thing, but it's very helpful, So I would just think about that and be skillful about what you do. So, if you want to make a living playing music, and you're just getting on the scene, don't live in a small city. Move to a bigger city where there are more musicians. And if you find that you don't really like that, then it might be that you don't really want to play for a living. So I would say that that means move to Paris, London, Berlin, New York, those kinds of places. Don't be picky. In other words, if you have to play wedding gigs for a while, play wedding gigs. If you have to do a show, whatever, and a show traveling Europe or the U.S., then play a show. You get if you're a woodwind player, you get strong at your doubles. It's not going to hurt you. You'll be stronger no matter what. So that's what I would say. Yeah.